Hello everyone, so I'm here today to do a bit of a wrap-up of my Reading Around the World project. If you have not been familiar with that, I have been reading a book from each country in the last year and a half or so, and I haven't made this as challenging as other people, like in terms of my rules on how to choose the books, but also if I had read from a country previously, I didn't include that in my challenge, so I ended up with about 70 countries to read, so that was a lot more manageable to me. And yes, I just wanted to wrap a little bit around the project and what I thought about doing this, and what were the highlights and the lower lights and stuff like that. So yeah, first of all, I think that sometimes it was difficult to find books, and I think that made that some countries I couldn't find the kind of books I would like to read, and so I just read something. And so sometimes it was a little bit difficult. It felt like pushing myself too much. But on the other hand, I've also found things that I would have never found otherwise. So it's a balance that you have to strike. And the other thing that I have loved about doing this challenge is sharing it with you through videos. Hopefully, I have gotten so many comments of people that are trying to do similar things, and they have found books that they're interested in from my videos. So that's one of the things. But also, they have recommended books to me that they have read about countries that I couldn't find a book that I enjoyed, and so maybe I will find a book from their lists to read forward. And that was great, and I am indeed going to take some of those recommendations forward. But let's just talk a little bit about some things that happened during the challenge that I might or might not have expected. First of all, one of my favorite books that I found in this channel, and this is the kind of thing that I do it for, is Jeb Jeb Talk by Kachi Jetnil Kijiner. And these are poems from a Marshallese woman. I would never have picked up poems. I would never had found these from Marshall Islands, I don't think, if it was not for this challenge. And they were amazing. They were very snarky, they were very punchy, they were very political, they were very anti-racist, and I really, really enjoyed them. And I didn't expect them to enjoy it. So yes, I highly recommend this one, and also, like, this is why the challenge was worth it for me, this kind of books. On the other hand, I also had some dads. The biggest that comes to mind was Quixote. I think the author was Ali Al-Sahed or something like that. I read that from Bahrain because I couldn't find anything else from Bahrain, and it just read like fan fiction to a bad police crime series. One of those Americans crime series, fan fiction of that. The writing was terrible, the storyline was terrible, the characters were terrible, and it was just terrible overall. So that's probably the worst book that I read for this challenge, and that's why I understand that some people don't want to make these kind of challenges, because you also get things like that. But yeah, I mean, this is really good, so it balances out to me. The other thing that I found very interesting is that at the beginning of the challenge, I kind of wonder with myself if I should do it like alphabetically, because otherwise I will have to read a lot of books from the same region, and then it will be kind of samey. Or if I could read from like geographically, and I ended up going geographically, and I'm so glad I did, because I actually really enjoyed reading similar stories for certain areas, and sometimes they didn't have as much connection. Like for example, in like South America, I didn't find that many connections, or like in many parts of Europe, I didn't find that many connections. And with that said, also there were many places where I had read most of the country, so I only had to read one or two, and then I didn't find those connections anyway, because I didn't read that many books from those areas, because I had already tackled those areas in previous years. But one region that stuck out to me that I had not read a lot before, and I read quite a few books in that area, and I think it really enhanced my experience that I read altogether, was like former Yugoslavia kind of area. So I think I had only read from maybe like one or two countries there, and reading so many perspectives from an area that has so much of shared history kind of completed the picture a lot more for me, and especially like former Yugoslavia. They were the same country, and the lines are blur of who is Slovenian, who is Slovakian, who is, and the lines of who is Slovenian or who is Serbian or who is Bosnian is kind of blurred sometimes, because some people, like, their parents were from one place but they live in a different place and stuff like that. And also many of these people have migrated to other countries from like the time of the war, which is within my lifetime, so it's not that far away. So there was one that was from he lived in Germany, the other one in Finland, but they were all talking about the shared common ancestry of that area and all the things that happened that made them separate. And I think that reading all those books in quick succession really helped me understand much better how it looked like. The other region that I also felt that more pronounced than other areas was Oceania. So all the little islands in the Pacific, like Kiribati, Vanuatu, Marshall Islands, Solomon Islands, all of those places, they do share kind of like an ancestry as well, and like a culture, and you could also see that seeping through, and some of them are more connected than others because geography and that area is humongous. But yeah, I think that you could see those connections to each other by reading these books kind of together. And that area was a little bit more difficult to find books from, so some of them were just non-fiction about the area rather than about people from there. But the ones that were from there definitely had like some common elements, even if the idea of the book was very different. The other thing that I also noticed is that often in certain regions they had like a certain style or a certain, like, there were some regions where it was a lot easier to find short stories or poems or long novels about political stuff. Like, there were kind of places that have like a certain type of genre or a certain type of thing that they apparently like to read, which was also interesting to see. And I think that's why I'm so glad I did this geographically and not alphabetically. And apart from reading books and finding books for each country, I think one of the other challenges that I had was how to define what a country is. So for example, when I talked about the UK, I recommended a book for each country within the UK, so Wales, England, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. But for example, like in other parts, they also have these kind of things. Like even in Spain, they have the Basque Country or Catalonia, and I didn't like differentiate that as much. I tried to be diverse on the recommendations, especially if I had read many books from there. Like also in the US or Australia, I would prefer to have some recommendations from native authors, and there's all this race thing within a country, so obviously reading one book from one country doesn't represent that country, and I sometimes struggle with that a little bit, but I think that overall I managed to get a decent balance on that. And as I said, this does not mean that I'm not going to read from any of these countries anymore. It was a starting point to see which countries I'm more interested in, and which countries I find really interesting and want to deep dive into. And with that, I think it's a logical point to talk about how am I going to continue with this project in the next year, so I'm not going to do anything as crazy as I did, but I have collected all of the recommendations that people have left me on the comments, and if you want me to share that, I can share that as well. I don't think if a video would be the most appropriate thing, because I don't know that much about many of these books, and there are a lot of books, so it will either be a very meaningless video or a very long video. So maybe I can just make a list and post it somewhere where you can reach it. But I have chosen 5 books from that list that I am going to read in the next year, which sounds like a very manageable, very interesting thing to do. So the first one I chose was Call Me Cassandra by Marcial Gala, and this is a Cuban author, and this book is about a child in an abusive family in Cuba. And as far as I understand, maybe there is also queer stuff going on. The author is a poet, so I'm hoping that this is going to be very interesting and very well written, and I'm very excited for this. The next one is one that I have actually wanted to read for a long time, and I thought it was recommended in the comments, and I think, like, yeah, that makes sense. I want to read it, so let's just go for it. It's also a very, very tiny book, and it's A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid. Jamaica Kincaid is from Antigua and Barbuda, and this book, as far as I understand, is an essay, sort of, about the tourist industry in the area and how toxic it can be. I have read another book about the tourist industry for Costa Rica, and I really enjoyed those topics. I think it's something that maybe it's not discussed enough, and Jamaica Kincaid is a very well-known author that is very recognized, so I'm really looking forward for this. Then moving to Europe, again, another one that was in my radar for a long time, and someone recommended it to me in the comments, and I was like, yeah, let's just go for it. And that is Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset, and this from Sweden. This is the first book. I think it's a trilogy. And it's very pretty, but also it's kind of like historical fiction in the, I don't know exactly the times, but like 1600, 1700, something like that, and this woman in that era. So yeah, that sounds very interesting as well, and I'm looking forward to reading that. And then the next 2 books I do not have with me. The first one is Solenoid by Mircea Cartarescu. It has been everywhere in booktube for a while. I have read Mircea Cartarescu. It was like a short non-fiction story thing, and I didn't love it, but Solenoid sounds a lot more interesting, and I have read and I have heard a lot of good things about it, so I'm hoping I'm liking it. It is described as a very reflective literary experience that explores the intersection of light, art, and philosophy through a surreal, dreamlike lens. It sounds wild. I don't know if it will be my kind of thing, but there is the audiobook of this in script, so I decided I'm going to listen to that in script and see how I like that. And then the last book in this list I haven't gotten my hands on yet, but I'm looking forward to reading as well, and it's The Sorrow of War, a novel about North Vietnam by Bao Ninh. And this, as you can imagine, is for Vietnam, and it's about the horrors of war from the Vietnamese perspective. So yeah, I'm also really looking forward to that one in the next year. So this sounds like a much more manageable year for me. But yeah, again, if you want me to talk more about the books that I recommend, the ones that I was recommended, I would love to do that. And at the next video, bye!